My name is Vickie Rotante. I'm the Director of Global Sourcing for QVC and HSN. I have been with QVC about 2.5 years, and I and my team, my fabulous team, manage their 20 private apparel brands. I've worked with several other companies throughout my tenure, Urban Sporting Goods New York and Company, and as well as living in Hong Kong for a few years working for a company called Tilsonburg. So I also am thrilled to serve on the board of the Philadelphia Fashion Incubator since 2018, and I am absolutely thrilled to be here.
All right, well, thank you for being with us today. So I have your presentation pulled up, so just say next slide, and
Sure.
The floor is all yours. All
right, so I'll start with the cover page and characteristics of highly effective women. Certainly, a subject near and dear to my heart, and probably something I could have written a dissertation on through my 30 years of experience. But I definitely have found certain qualities that are stand out to me that really make good leaders and really know how to motivate teams and bring them on the journey. So those are the ones those are the 8 qualities I've actually chosen for this slide, but would certainly love at the end of this presentation to hear more from the audience about what your experience is and what your thoughts are. So we can go to next. So the 8 I've chosen are inclusive leadership, self-awareness, humility, tolerance for failure, empathy, persuasiveness, having an entrepreneurial spirit, and resilience. Again, I could go on, but these to me seem to really inform the best leadership practices. So I'm going to start by saying, as a general statement, leaders today, whatever gender, are faced with a plethora of adaptive changes that have not been encountered before. The reasons are clear. Business leaders today lead a highly diverse, multi-generational teams and workforces, and the markets for their products, the consumers, are equally diverse. Developing empathy, intuition, strong relational skills, and a high degree of emotional intelligence are thus critical leadership qualities. In my view, this is most effectively accomplished by people who are visionary, inclusive, that's a big one for me, can see business issues from varying perspectives, and those who optimize trust and engagement from their teams. So we can go to next. As an overall to continue with an overall statement, like many of you, I've had my share of professional experiences, both positive and negative. In my 30 years in the fashion industry, I've had the good fortune and not such good fortune of working with both men and women of varying leadership styles. Still, in short, I've learned leadership is not about a title or designation. Again, leadership is back to what the earlier panel said, is not about title. To me, instead, it's about impact, influence, and inspiration, and having the confidence to achieve outcomes and overcome hardships and resistance. I think this is particularly germane to women. I have to agree with the earlier panel. Women don't own. I think it was Shema who mentioned women don't own their accomplishments, and that to me is a big deal. And getting over that and having the confidence to get over that is very important. It's about building trusting relationships. It's about making impartial decisions based on fact for the good of the team and the business, a non-emotional decision. And finally, it's about motivating employees to take action, not to push them, but rather to inspire them to really want to. And that, to me, is also very key as being an effective leader, because when you inspire people to want to do something and to achieve their best, the outcomes will be better, both professionally and for them personally. Without question, they'll be better. So really, really important. In truth, leadership traits transcend gender, but differences can and do exist based on training and cultural expectations. Given this reality, even today, in 2021, women leaders face the challenge of being true to themselves while navigating shifting gender expectations, social roles, and evolving perceptions of what authentic and strong leadership is. Next. So we'll talk first about fostering inclusive leadership. Again, in my experience, leaders display confidence and an orientation toward engaging and empowering their teams while still maintaining a strong but open-minded presence throughout. They see themselves as a first among equals and recognize that teamwork often yields the best results. Consequently, female leaders can often be perceived as downplaying their personal contributions, which is a misperception and certainly in my opinion and not true. Instead, they shift the focus. What women do is that they shift the focus to the success of the team and the contributions of the collective. So it's a little bit of a difference. Again, this is, my experience. Men and women just own it differently. But I think in our society, their accomplishments, they own it differently. But I think in our society, business language has been evolved as such a male-focused language that unless that exact path is followed, it's perceived as less than. And in fact, the most successful women I work with really, worked the collective, really wanted to lean in, really led by example. They were that first among equals. And it's had incredible outcomes for the business. This has a positive effect and results in a tighter team engagement and alignment, displays trust that, of course, must be earned, and allows others to own and lead initiatives. Another big one for me, because when somebody owns it and leads it, you can support them in the background, but if you give them the platform to own it, it's going to win. And, very positive business outcomes as an organization can sustain a culture of innovation without leaning into the bringing power of its people. And that means giving people the platform. So super passionate about fostering inclusive leadership. Next, please. Self-awareness. So this is a big one, but self-aware executives are better able to navigate their weaknesses. They've analyzed their blind spots, and they're able to make better decisions and plan for success. Unsurprisingly, self-aware executives are more likely to be better communicators, understand how others perceive them, and have a greater ability for shaping that perception. Women leaders who aren't self-aware are more difficult to trust. I've experienced that in my past. That's partly because lack of self-awareness can be seen as selfish, and if somebody isn't thinking about how their actions are affecting others, we assume they're thinking about themselves, and hence the lack of trust evolves. But self-awareness to me is, a huge thing. I think I don't see it as much now, but a decade before, I found that it was sometimes women felt they needed to be really hard and difficult to be considered strong, and that's not true. And I think this awareness, this self-awareness that has evolved as businesses evolve and as perceptions have evolved. So it's really, really important. And next, please. Humility. Forgive the lack of why there. Hiding. Throughout my career, I've observed that men generally do a louder job of tooting their own horns. And I do apologize for the dogs, excuse me. They do a louder job of tooting their own horns. Not necessarily a better job, just a louder job. Unfortunately, corporate America, and as the Harvard Business Review notes, can confuse displays of confidence as shows of competence, which has nothing to do with each other, but it's often confused. And in fact, humility really allows a leader's humanity to peek through, which inspires people to follow. Not only does humility inspire fellowship, but it also tends to help organizations focus more pointedly on their overarching goals. When I was writing this presentation, I always like to make sure I refer back to business publications, and I was thrilled to find that the Wall Street Journal agrees that the best bosses are humble bosses. However, while humility is a great leadership trait, it can sometimes go too far and slide into subservience or be perceived as doing so with women. So I think we have to, as women and as effective leaders, we have to balance that humility. or the perception, rather, of that humility. Not speaking up when you have to be proud of something or if you have a great idea does not help progress. Again, a recent study at Harvard Business Review shows that women tend to be harder on themselves than men, and that's something that can be detrimental to leadership. Again, humility is all about balance. Next, please. The tolerance of failure. This is germane to growth, and leaders that don't have a tolerance for failure are not giving anybody permission to experiment. And of course, I'm referring to intelligent mistakes. You all know what I mean by that. And we all need room to make mistakes. The goal should be to learn from them and move forward without repeating them. And a company whose employees are constantly afraid of failing will only create subpar performance and significant problems in the future. The concept of failure is a nuanced one with many cultural implications. However, I found that most successful people will tell you how failure and learning from it has contributed to their success. Sadly, so many leaders today are robbing their teams of this valuable experience. And when I say that, I refer to a culture of fear, which I'm very fortunate in QVC to be in a fabulous culture, but I've had past experiences that really did not foster that. It does stifle people. Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos says multi-billion-dollar failures, of course that's Jeff Bezos, not everybody can afford that, but nonetheless, the theory, are actually a good thing. If the size of your failures isn't growing, you're not going to be inventing at a size that can actually move the needle. And I included a quote from Ariana Huffington here, which I love, which is, we need to accept that we won't always make the right decisions, that will screw up royally. Sometimes understanding that failure is not the opposite of success, it's part of success. And I completely espouse that. I think it's really, really, really important. Next, please. Empathy. Unfortunate but true, but empathy is traditionally seen as a feminine characteristic. This is changing a bit, but nonetheless, I think that's more prevalent, still somewhat prevalent. However, according to a study by Development Dimensions International, a global leadership consulting firm, it is the single most important leadership trait that helps guarantee overall success. While it's sometimes considered a soft skill or an interpersonal/people skill, empathy in a leader promotes cooperation and commitment in the workplace. And in fact, empathy has become such a critical trait for leaders and companies that many corporations are offering training, according to, again, the Wall Street Journal. I can say that my company is doing that as well, and it's super, super important. Empathy is not only good for the happiness of its employees, it's also good for a company's bottom line. Empathetic leaders can accelerate companies' growth and innovation, and a study showed that great ideas come from teams that exhibited characteristics generally considered feminine, including generosity, curiosity, empathy, and emotional intelligence. Next, please. Persuasiveness. Persuasiveness and motivational can be similar to me, but I feel persuasiveness, again, is more of that pushing, that inspiring aspect. And to me, great female leaders trait, another great female leadership trait is persuasiveness. There was a study done with 300 women leaders firms around the world that show women tend to be more persuasive than men, thanks in large part to their humility and empathy. According to the study, women tend to be more attuned to situations, which means they're able to accurately take in information on all sides, synthesize it, and incorporate it into a larger solution. In other words, they read the room better. However, as with any argument, part of the skill of persuasion means genuinely believing in the idea you are presenting. Passion is incredibly compelling and can move the needle towards success both personally and professionally. And this also relates back to women owning what they want, owning what they love, and going for it. Next, please. An entrepreneurial spirit. I find highly effective women are often more willing to flex the rules to get things done. I believe part of this impetus is that women often have to get through more roadblocks than men. And in fact, again, Harvard Business Review study cited that women excel in taking initiative and driving results as a result of it. It's also because women tend to push creative limits and innovate to get better, both personally and professionally. They've had to overcome a lot, so we push. And, different studies have actually show that women are more likely to be transformational leaders and tend to motivate employees to be more dedicated and creative. So entrepreneurial spirit is about getting the job done despite whatever obstacles. It's about initiative taking. It's about making it happen and creatively doing so, sometimes in the face of significant roadblocks. So huge quality for effective women leader. Next, please. Resilience. Another really, without question, important trait for women. Women tend to bounce back slightly quicker than men. I mean, women in general handle stress better than men. When the chips are down, women tend to move past the initial stress more quickly and effectively. This, to me, is not only true professionally, but also I've seen this personally. In a study that shows 64% of female leaders surveyed that they encounter stressful events that stop them from thinking clearly at least one time per day, that they must get over that, right? Whether that's business-related or whether that's a call from their children or whether that's a call from an aging relative or whatever else is in their plate or on their plate. Women have a lot to juggle. Notwithstanding, they could not let this interrupt their workday and need to move on quickly. Long story short, women leaders tend to be better jugglers. Again, no surprise there, which translates in a business setting to agility, flexibility, and resiliency. Next, please. So thank you very much. Some honorable mentions that should be a given in terms of highly effective characteristics of successful women are also, of course, intelligence, honesty, agility, financial acumen, negotiation skills, emotional intelligence, etc. But to me, those should be given. And then I just included some quotes that I love. Option A, when option A is not available, so let's take the shit out of option B. Forgive my language, Sheryl Sandberg. I have that in my office. I love it. And my other favorite one is keep your heels high and your head keep your heels and your standards high. So just some fun quotes. And in closing, I would love to connect and hear from the audience.
Well, thank you so much, Vickie. And a reminder, if anybody wants to ask a live question, we would love to hear from you. So hit 5-star, and I can unmute you so you can ask a live question. But we have received several questions that have come in through our chat. So we're going to start with those. Okay. So our first question comes from Kira. And Kira says, do you think it's possible to be too empathetic in the workplace?
I think it's possible to be perceived as too empathetic in the workplace. Again, I think empathy is a hugely important characteristic, but I think it's how you show it. To me, a lot of this is perception. But I think empathy is reading the room, understanding what people are going through. Now. To your point, Kira, I don't think that there's definitely boundaries there. I mean, to be empathetic is not to be walked all over. To be empathetic is not to be taken advantage of. That's a very different thing. To me, empathy is about mindfulness, it's about respect, it's about understanding, and it's about wanting to make a great place to work.
Very well said. Thank you. So our next question comes from Susanna, and she says, how did you manage working with a leader who lacks self-awareness?
Yeah. I think drinking a lot of wine at night when I went home was part of the solution. You know, it's tough. You know, I think there's been a few. Again, thankfully, here where I am now, I have fabulous leaders and fabulous people, so that's thankfully in my past. But, you know, I would say it's about reading the room. I mean, when you have somebody who has a particular personality who's very mercurial and changes their mind day to day, hour to hour, or who is not necessarily the most perhaps ethical person, I think it's a matter of understanding where the position, understanding the place that they're in that day, and navigating as best as you can without losing yourself. I think that's really important. You know, I've been in situations where I've seen people not necessarily tell the truth in a business situation, and you know, that's a really awkward place to be. And you know, I couldn't be part of that. You know, I certainly didn't highlight it at the moment, but it wasn't something I could be part of. So I think it's a matter of staying true to yourself and just being agile.
That's wonderful advice. Thank you. Well, this question kind of follows up on that. And Anita said, you stated that women are more likely to become entrepreneurs than men as a result of agile thinking. Why do you think that's the case?
And this is just my experience, of course, but I think women are jugglers. Well, to be an entrepreneur, you have, and I had my own business, consulting business for 3 years. To be an entrepreneur, you have to move and shake on a moment's notice. You have to be agile. You have to be creative to get things done. You have to, if there's not a path from A to Z, you have to create that path. And you have to be super nimble with your business and with your time. So I find that women tend to do that a little more naturally. And that's a general statement, of course. And that's certainly not something I would say is a hard and fast rule. But I think that women tend to lean into those skills better, and it's a little bit more natural. Men tend to be more of, if I could use a metaphor, the bull in the china shop metaphor. Like I would say, and again, this is a gross generalization, but it's just for imagery. Men would be the bull in the china shop, where women would be walking in between shelves, and no glasses will be broken. But at the end of the day, they'll get everything done that they need and get it done really well. So I feel that that's just a skill that women tend to have on average.
Oh, very well said. Thank you. Well, we have 2 more questions before we ask for final thoughts from you. So next question comes from Harper, and she says, how can we successfully raise to our executive or HR teams to take a proactive approach to examine and resolve discrepancy in salaries or titles by gender? That's a big one. And I think, honestly, by the facts. I think, everything, when a business case is put in front of somebody, it's very hard to argue with, right? If a person comes with a case that about what men make, what women make, and how we can bridge that gap. First of all, it does a lot of things for the business. It's great public relations for the business that's doing so. It's the right thing to do, and it speaks positive volumes about that company's leadership, that they're willing to engage in that conversation. Bridging it, because a company's probably not going to disclose the salaries of the individual people, nor can they. But I would bridge it, say I think it's really passionate. We're really passionate about this. I would do it alone. I would try to get some colleagues together, and that we want to ensure that everyone is being paid what they deserve to be paid. So I think it's a fair, honest conversation to raise on a polite scenario in a business case format. Oh, very well said. So this is our final question before we go to final words. So this question comes from Jen, and she says, one of the key pillars you mentioned was the ability to persuade. I think at times women can struggle with this if they're too passionate, and it can turn people off to not hear the message. So what advice would you give for women to work on and honing their ability to persuade in a respectful yet empowered way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think keeping your eye on the prize is very important, and reading the room is very important. So one of the things I can speak for myself, when I want to be persuasive about something, again, I start with what the benefits are for this argument, right? What are the benefits? What's the goal of my persuasion, and how is that going to benefit my audience? And on top of that, I'll layer in a business case. But I think that's starting with how it will benefit someone else, I think is a perfect beginning, because then it's going to open up their ears.
Oh, very well said. Thank you. Well, I think we are almost at time. So before we move on to our next panel, Vickie, do you have any final words of wisdom for our audience today?
No words of wisdom. If we have, I would love to hear a few. If anybody has any words of wisdom for us, I mean, I would love to hear. I mean, we have such an incredible group of women on this call. I'd love to hear some of their thoughts. If anybody's going.
Yeah. So if anybody would like to give us some words of wisdom, hit 5-star, and I can unmute you. So we'd love to hear from anybody. All right, one more second. Our audience tends to be so shy. Oh, wait, here we go. All right, go ahead, please.
Yes, this is Sue Gilmore from Trident Land Transfer. I'm the general sales manager here. And I was just thinking, when I go into a room and I'm presenting something, I tend to be outgoing and emotional and really a cheerleader type. And I have learned that it's better to go in with facts. It's better to go in with a very well prepared thesis, and to have also always have money involved and money in in your thought pattern, so that everyone that is listening knows that you've considered the cost to the organization.
Absolutely. I think that is, you are 100% correct. You're absolutely right. What's the benefit, right? What's the benefit to the audience of your presentation? What's the benefit? Benefit could be money. Benefit could be positive, to your point, money. It could be positive press. It could be many, many things. But what's in it for them? That's really the bottom line. And you said it perfectly. At the end of the day, when you're presenting to somebody, they want to know first. It's human nature. What's in it for them, or their business, or their team, or whatever.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's wonderful advice, and thank you, everybody. So on that point, I think we are going to end. So, Vickie, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.